What's up, y'all? I know nowadays advertising is considered obnoxious and invasive, and I think that that's been the consensus pretty much since the beginning of advertising as a whole. Most people don't want to be sold something, and when that something interrupts your entertainment, that only exacerbates the issue with any given commercial. However, recently I've become fascinated with advertising done right, where it almost doesn't feel like you're even being sold a product. A good ad will hyperfixate on the proper target audience and convince them that purchasing their product is their idea. And my personal favorite type is video game advertising. There's something so compelling about them, especially the ones that I encountered in my adolescence. So that's what this video is. Think of it as a love letter of the nostalgia that I have for everything video game advertising. Let's take a trip into the lost art of video game ads. While I am relatively young, I also recognize I'm probably an unk to a big sector of the internet in 2025. Back in my days, believe it or not, we didn't get all our information and entertainment from screens. There are these things called books that house treasure troves of information, images, and stories. More specifically, video game magazines were the primary source for all things gaming. And because the publishers could appeal to their niche audiences instead of having to broadly appeal to more general audiences, this understanding of their core demographic is what gave way to some of the greatest video game advertising. In all honesty, the magazines themselves are essentially one big physical ad compilation. And because every page is attempting to sell you on buying their game out of the thousands of others that you have available, the marketing teams had to get creative. Growing up, I really only had access to the more mainstream stuff like Nintendo Power, Game Informer, and PlayStation Magazine, but there were countless of other options out there for every kind of fan. Like I previously stated, the understanding of the audience is what's most important. This allows for the creative teams to really take risks with what they put out to print. One of the most iconic ads that represents my point here is this one for Rayman 3 printed in Nintendo Power issue 166. Now, today this is incredibly tame, but in 2003 this was edgy, this was wild, this was vulgar even, and that's also a huge part of the appeal. Many of the ads that I'm going to be discussing today were edgy for the time, but that's what makes them charming in the modern day. Another example is this Crash Bandicoot ad printed in the same issue. Speaking of Crash, he and Rayman are some of the bigger standouts in terms of having their marketing almost perfectly capture the cartoonish and chaotic nature of the characters and the games. Any ad containing either of these two is just so zany that it's perfect. And while I'm highlighting ads from franchises I hold near and dear to my heart, Parappa the Rapper is another one that has fire advertising. The games are obviously heavily hip-hop influenced, and that bleeds into the ads as well. I think the genre of hip-hop is perceived too seriously sometimes, and I love how Parappa has always leaned into the funner aspects of it. While I was sifting through some of these magazines, some of the ads that I stumbled upon really told the line a bit, even way more than that Rayman ad that I mentioned earlier. But they told the line in a good way. There's something really alluring about not giving a damn about reception and doing it for the artistry of catching attention. Positive or negative, I'm still looking at it and it elicits a reaction for sure. It may be because I was born a contrarian, but anything giving a middle finger to the status quo is so beautiful, and it perfectly represents video game culture. Many games for the ads that I'm talking about and showing you on screen are for games that I've never even heard of, but I may try them off the strength of the aura of these ads, so at the end of the day, they do their jobs exceedingly well. Even the ugly ones ooze this oddly specific charm that's hard for me to describe, but if you know, you know. Nintendo Power was obviously all about Nintendo, so we get some of the dopest interpretations of these game worlds and characters we all know and love. The overwhelming majority of these covers are excellent, and I think it's a big part of kind of what sets them apart from other magazines outside of being specific to the brand. PlayStation Magazine is the gaming magazine that had more of my allegiance back in the day because the PlayStation was the first console I ever laid eyes on, and the PS2 was by far the best console I've ever played in my entire life, even now. And while their covers in comparison to Nintendo Power leave a bit more to be desired, the inside is basically more of all of the things I love wrapped up in that PlayStation charm. And due to the target audience not being as young, the games and the products advertised don't need to be so PG. If what we see in Nintendo Power is rated E for everyone, PlayStation Magazine in that same vein would be T for teen, which gives way to an entirely different vibe. The ads run in these magazines are also much closer to the edginess I described earlier that became a key part of the brand. Drug references and even body horror were on the table. And even today, something about it is just so cool. There's a level of intrigue that won't allow me to look away. Art house vibes. While I know for some it feels like it's trying too hard, but when it hits the right notes, it resonates and it resonates hard. GamePro magazine and IGN Unplugged are a bit further step upwards in terms of maturity, discussing the M-rated games like BMX XX and Grand Theft Auto and displaying more explicit art inside and out. Fun in its own way, but aiming for a much older demographic, which at the time made sense because the average age of gamers were no longer young children. Young adults were now essentially the target audience, and these magazines ran with that in a lot of ways. I want this video to come across as a love letter to video game advertising, so I want to cover some of the additional interesting things I saw when combing through all of this. I already discussed ads for the video games themselves, but there were also ads for products and services. Walmart ads are a prime example of the peak that I came across when researching this video. They were really investing in their game audience at the time, especially in the 2000s. I know most of y'all remember the gaming kiosks that were in the store, but that was only the tip of the iceberg. The Walmart GameCube ads are the ones that stuck with me the most and are some of the most imaginative. Or maybe it's just the early 2000s Nintendo consoles having insane aura that made these ads great. Like this Kmart ad for the Game Boy Player, something I have and I still use till this day. I know it doesn't look like much, but it captures the simplicity of playing these games during my childhood and makes me want to boot mine up as I write this. Or this Game Boy Advance ad from Best Buy. This shit is so emblematic of the era. But back to Walmart. They had this program called N-Crew, which actually has very little information out there on the internet outside of the preservation of the ads. Thank God for the existence of the Internet Archive though, because I was able to find the archive web pages and gathered more information. N-Crew was a collaboration between Walmart and Nintendo that was free to sign up. You had to simply enter your email address and date of birth and you were in. You were automatically put on an emailing list for the newsletter, providing deals and gaming news. And apparently also members received some kind of special access on their website. Unfortunately, because I can only see the archived version, there's no way for me to see what hidden goodies were on the site. But if you're watching this and have any idea what exclusive perks you received, please let me know in the comments because I am genuinely interested. Similarly, there was also superpower supplies. You could call the toll-free number and get a bunch of gaming adjacent products. For example, this dope Pokemon crew neck for $9, or these adorable Yoshi plushes for $12, among other things. Man, seeing these prices compared to basically anything in 2025 is genuinely heartbreaking. Superpower Supplies did their own catalogs in addition to their ads in Nintendo Power. They sold all kinds of cool shit like storage bins and binders for your games, or Legend of Zelda action figures, or a bunch of other things that were kind of ahead of their time. Not sure how well these did in terms of sales, but I feel like they would make a killing in the modern day. Even adjusted for inflation, I would probably buy some of this stuff. Flipping through the pages of Nintendo Power, you may come across an ocarina. These are ads for Songbird Ocarinas, a company hand-making ocarinas still till this day. They were obviously capitalizing on the Legend of Zelda craze at the time when these ads were running in the 2000s, and even today they still have a dedicated section for it on their website. I remember wanting one of these so bad and asking my mom, and she swore it was a scam before she bought me a harmonica instead and told me to use my imagination. I'm still bitter. Anyone in the mood for Tony's Pizza? Because suddenly I am. Anyone in the mood to chew gum that's flavor is going to dissipate in 6 minutes? Because all of a sudden I am. Hey mom, can I have the Gamester Pro Racer wheel for Christmas? Damn. I would dropkick an elderly person just to taste the limited edition Sam Raimi Spider-Man Pop-Tart.
See you, chump. What the hell?
Yes! No.
I like 'em wild.
Crazy good!
I don't think I've ever said this in a video, but I actually do have a journalism degree. Gaming journalism was a big part of my decision to do that, even though it kinda took me this video to recognize it. And now, with that experience, I appreciate a lot of the stuff in here even more. Beyond just the pretty pictures, the range of the stuff that you get to see and read within just a single issue is genuinely incredible. Pre-internet, this kind of shit was valuable. Comprehensive guides and walkthroughs for games with detailed breakdowns of basically anything you need. Previews for upcoming games and reviews for ones that were already released at the time. Dope giveaways like this trip to Nintendo of America and you get your own copy of WarioWare and a Game Boy SP. Or this insane giveaway of a Game Boy Advance multiplayer set for the winner and their friends that awards them 4 GBAs, 4 copies of Super Mario Advance or F-Zero Maximum Velocity, and 3 link cables. Bro, I genuinely would have made someone disappear for this kind of reward. There's also cool interviews in these magazines too, with the likes of Yasunori Mitsuda, who was the composer for Chrono Trigger among a ton of other projects. In PlayStation Magazine, he goes into details about the production of making music for Xenogears in 2002. Or Eiji Aonuma, the lead producer for The Legend of Zelda on the heels of Wind Waker, discussing his vision for future games in 2005. Another example is this Q&A with Takashi Iizuka discussing the edgier and grittier direction in Shadow the Hedgehog that same year. Or even this wonderful article written by the people at PlayStation Magazine discussing the severely underrated Jak and Daxter long before it gained its cult-like following. These are simply examples though, there's so many of these in every single issue. For a nerd like me, these time capsules are wonderful. PlayStation Magazine not only reviewed games, but they also did film reviews by reviewing DVDs of popular films of the time, a phenomenal idea. The audience overlap was probably pretty vast, and as a DVD and Blu-ray collector myself, as well as a film lover, these are very appreciated. They not only discuss just the films, but even discuss the additional tidbits exclusive to the home releases, like the commentary and the deleted scenes. Nintendo Power even did yearly awards, so let's take a peek at the 2001 winners to contextualize where gaming media stood at the time, and wrap up this portion of the video. This was published in the May 2002 issue. Smash Melee dominated these awards, winning Best Overall, Best GameCube Title, Best Overall Graphics, Best Music, Best Sequel, Best Replay Value, Best Multiplayer. Game & Watch won the Best Unlockable Character. The Super Scope won the Best New Weapon, and collecting all the trophies is considered the hardest job in all of gaming, according to the Nintendo Power staff. Melee is absolutely fire, but this is low-key glazing. The bias towards Melee is a little bit telling. Golden Sun got the second most amount of love, which is actually a pleasant surprise because until this day, that game is underrated as hell. It won Best GBA Game, Best GBA Graphics, Best RPG Strategy Game, and the most difficult boss is the Fusion Dragon. Seriously, go play that shit if you get the chance. It's more accessible than ever, and it's a wonderful time. I haven't even mentioned the artist showcases, additional subscription sign-up bonuses, community events, and so much more. There's so much to love about these gamer magazines, and almost every issue is uniquely wonderful. Not a minute reading through any of these ever felt wasted. If you want to look through some of these and experience them for yourself, I'm going to link the massive internet archive in the description. Please, if you like anything that you've seen in this video, do yourself a favor and check them out. Also, this is a shameless plug, but if you want to be drip-fed some of these ads and interesting articles that I find interesting, I do have a Twitter account where I'm going to be posting on there periodically, a couple of times a day, so check that out. But unfortunately for nerds like me, print media went the way of the dodo and faded out of relevance. But there is another representation of video game advertising that I want to talk about, which was the eventual replacement for the former. Not because it was the natural evolution or even an improvement, but because of its availability. Not everyone will subscribe to a magazine, but everyone owned a TV.
IGPX is over, but if you're still jonesing for more racing, Bondi's got you covered with a new game for the PS2, IGPX. Let's see what's under the hood. Well, there's a bunch of tracks, all the characters and mechs from the show, and a lot of new ones too. You start as Satomi all the way back in the IG3. After a few simulator races, you're off and running. It's more about the fighting than the racing. Pick a strategy according to who you're up against. Learn some combos and get with the beatdowns. Yeah, baby. Winning gives you points to upgrade your mechs. Different parts mean different attacks. When you make it to the IG1, it's all about speed mode. Power Satomi up when you get the warning and see if you can beat the other guy. Now for the bad news. The game's hard, but it's pretty short. You can probably beat the whole thing in a few sit-downs. But you definitely get that old IGPX feeling when you're cracking down on Sledge Mama or dropping the hammer to pull out a photo finish. A word of warning though, watch out for White Snow's Puppet Master attack. What a load. Beat the whole game and you get to face the rocket. And lose, probably. I may be biased, but I dig this game. Check it out if you're a fan of the show. Toonami gives IGPX for the PS2 a 7 out of 10. Drop it like it's hot.
By the early 2000s, basically every household had at least one television, and many even had two. Those screens were obviously used for the video games that we've been discussing so far on home consoles, but they're obviously used for cable television primarily. And naturally, like everything else, there was an audience to appeal to in relation to selling these consoles and accompanying games. Now, in my opinion, I think pound for pound, TV ads are a bit inferior to the print ones. The charm doesn't quite translate the same. I think this is a result of more general audiences being targeted, however, there are certainly exceptions to the rule. For example, many of the traits that I brought up in relation to Crash Bandicoot translate very well to video format. He's still the chaotic good, lovable Bandicoot in every iteration.
Hey, plumber boy, mustache man, your worst nightmare has arrived.
Pack up your stuff. I got a little surprise for you here.
Check it out. What do you think about that?
We got real-time, 3D, lush organic environments.
How's that make you feel, buddy?
Feel a little like your days are numbered?
I'm gonna have to ask you to leave.
You're hurting my elbow.
Kingdom Hearts had one of the most iconic video game ads of all time, at least from my generation. Like, I literally get chills whenever I watch this ad because it truly does take me back. Older ads can also give us a peek to how much marketing for consoles have changed over time, something I think not many people acknowledge. In the era of the NES and the SNES, they were marketed as family devices. Everyone in the house could use and share, doubling as the family computer.
ファミリーコンピュータの楽しいカセット情報。
Will it be you? Will your family be the first to witness the birth of the incredible Nintendo Entertainment System?
Even in those days, the TV advertising appealed to a broader audience in an effort to get parents to invest in purchasing one. However, as time went on, consoles were less family devices and more so something you'd get for the adolescent in your family. However, as time went on, home consoles were less family devices and more something that you got for the kids. And without having to appeal to parents, they could take bigger risks with how wild they could get, especially from the PS2 era onwards, which is what I'm going to discuss the most.
For years I've lived a double life. In the day I do my job, I ride the bus, roll up my sleeves with the hoi polloi. But at night, I live a life of exhilaration.
Of missed heartbeats and adrenaline.
And, if the truth be known,
a life of dubious virtue.
I won't deny I've been engaged in violence, even indulged in it.
I've assailed adversaries, and not merely in self-defense.
I've exhibited disregard for life,
limb,
and property,
and savoured every moment.
You may not think it to look at me,
but I have commanded armies
and conquered worlds.
And though in achieving these things,
I've set morality aside,
I have no regrets.
For though I've led a double life, at least I can say
I've lived.
I talked about this a little bit before, but PlayStation was no stranger to pushing boundaries, and I think that's what I love the most about them. In comparison to their Nintendo counterparts, I think they cared way less about playing it safe, and instead had this almost macabre angle that made many of their ads unsettling but also alluring. The stylistic choices we discussed in the print ads really do translate to the television ads, making them feel less like ads and more like short films that happen to be selling you a product.
The gospel train is a-comin', I hear it just at hand. I hear the car wheels moving and a rumbling through the land. Oh, get on board. Get on board. Get on board. I hear the bell and whistle a-comin' around the curve. She's playing all her steam and power and straining every nerve. Oh, get on board. Get on board. Get on board. She's nearing out a station. Oh, sinner, don't be vain. But come and get your tickets and be ready for this train. Oh, get on board. Get on board. Get on board. Oh, get on board. Get on board. Get on board. Little children, there's room for many more.
I know it probably sounds like I'm sucking off Sony, and to be fair, I am a fanboy of the PS1 through 3 era, but I think the artistry and vision put into these are objectively entrancing. The PS2 era, I think, was the perfect middle ground. Once we get into the PS3 era, I think it becomes more experimental in a way that lost some of the plot. Some are interesting enough, but others are just so odd and not even in an interesting way, just head scratching. And while PlayStation had that portion of the market locked down, hence why the PS2 is the best selling console ever, Nintendo did try to switch it up here and there.
For the brightest colors always. What the?
Introducing Battle Tanks for Nintendo 64. Explosive tank action for up to 4 players.
Battle tanks.
Microsoft did the same, especially with the release of the Xbox 360.
Where's that tiger? Where's that tiger? Here's that tiger. Where's that tiger?
It's really a shame that you don't see stuff like this airing on television anymore. This shit is gold. Japan is notorious for cranking up the insanity on everything they touch, and video game ads are no different.
Oh no! Come on! Mamma mia! Per favore!
どんな顔したやつやってんやろな。うわっWi-Fi 通信で世界中のプレイヤーがライバルだ。マリオカート DS。うわビリなってもうた。ただいま。
While over stateside it's marketed more seriously, Japan focused on the fun factor. And both strategies are valid and they both work for their intended audiences. Now, I'm not a cultural expert on the Japanese, but everything is always brighter and more unhinged, and it just works for them. Because at the end of the day, video games are just about having fun.
どこがいいのか。
猿と遊んでみませんか。サルゲッチュ2。
プレイステーション。今日肉食べたい。肉。
ほら走らないの。本当にもう。ほらバナナ半額。安いわね。あら。
はい、大好評につきベストになったサルゲッチュ2お買い得です。
プレイステーション。
Now, because in a lot of ways they are several long advertisements for several different games, I want to touch on gaming television really quick. G4 is the poster boy that everyone knows about when it comes to gaming television. There's a ton of videos on the TV channel already out there, so I won't go too in-depth on that. But I do want to quickly discuss a lesser known show that I had never even heard of before this video. I mentioned GamePro magazine earlier, but it turns out there was a companion show that ran from 1991 to 1992. And while it probably had a lower budget than you'd expect, I kind of feel like it was ahead of its time, and it was charming as hell.
GamePro! Our favorite skin rashes return in Battletoads for the NES. A super power-up tip for Bloody Wolf on the T16. Hard-hitting arcade excitement and super high-impact football. And learn to fly and pilot wings for the SNES. All this and more on GamePro! Oh yeah!
It's centered around tips, tricks, and news, basically the filmed version of what you get from the magazines. After that 1 year, the show was canceled and they became infomercials that aired on the Sci-Fi Channel and USA Network. It eventually got picked up again, believe it or not, in 1998 before being canceled immediately again in 1999. A much shorter version of the show ended up on the Game Show Network called GamePro Minute, which didn't last much longer than its previous iterations. As a predecessor to what we would eventually get in the programming that came from the likes of G4, it is an interesting stepping stone in the industry. And it's unfortunate that it's obscure, because if I was around at the time, I probably would have enjoyed it even more. If you're interested, I have a couple episodes linked in the description, so maybe check it out. Nowadays, we get ads full of celebrities like Paul Rudd for the Nintendo Switch, or we need Rick and Morty to convince us to buy a PS5. Due to streaming and nobody using cable companies anymore, you don't really see as many ads for consoles or games anymore. Just a quick YouTube mid-roll ad or a video on TikTok telling you what's coming. Outside of the occasional Nintendo Direct or Gaming Awards show, the marketing for modern gaming is basically dead. With the death of cable television and the death of print media, video game ads died along with them. And with that death, video game ads became a lost art, and I couldn't be sadder about it. While I don't need corporations to tell me to buy new games, I damn sure love when they found creative ways to do so. And it's a shame nobody cares anymore. Yo, if you got this far, you probably liked this video, so maybe consider leaving a like. Maybe also consider some of the other videos on my channel, and if you end up liking those, you should subscribe. I also have channel memberships too. Signing up for that provides a tip for me and it gets you credited at the end of all my videos. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.